What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have several areas of interest now. We have a subtropical area of interest out in the mid-Atlantic right here, in the subtropical Atlantic, rather. We have an area of interest near the Lesser Antilles. And we have our big area of interest out here in the Caribbean Sea. We have a lot to talk about today, as this has really blown up in the last few hours. So let's go ahead and dive right into it right now. Here's the situation that we have going on. Once again, we have 3 areas of interest. This all fired up pretty much in the last few hours. Let's go ahead and show you what we were looking at earlier today. We were only seeing 1 area of interest at 7 a.m. Now we're seeing 3 at 1 p.m. Those times are in Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Eastern, respectively. But regardless of that, we have a lot to talk about today, so let's go ahead and get right into it now. So here we go. This is in the southwestern Caribbean Sea. This is Disturbance 1. This now has a 60% chance of formation in the next 7 days. A broad area of low pressure is likely to develop over the southwestern Caribbean Sea during the next day or two. Gradual development is possible thereafter, and a tropical depression could form over the weekend or early next week while the system drifts generally northward or northwestward over the central or western Caribbean Sea. Regardless of development, locally heavy rains are possible during the next several hours across several days. What am I saying, several hours? This system wouldn't be in the news if that were the case. Several days across portions of the area from Nicaragua, extending all the way north, southeastward, and eastward to northern Colombia. 10% chance of formation in the next 48 hours, 60% in the next 7 days. So we're going to have to pay close attention to that right now. Also, we're watching Disturbance 2, which is right off the Virgin Islands near Puerto Rico as well. It's actually right over Puerto Rico right now. A trough of low pressure near Puerto Rico is producing widespread cloudiness and showers over the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, the Northern Leeward Islands, and the adjacent waters in the Atlantic and in the northeastern Caribbean. That's a pretty wide area of convection going on right now. If we go ahead and show you satellite very quickly, that's how expansive it is over there, and we'll get to more of the analysis a little bit later. But slow development of the system is possible during the next 2 to 3 days as it moves west-northwestward near the Greater Antilles. After that time, the system is expected to be absorbed into the low-pressure area over the Caribbean. Regardless of development, locally heavy rains are possible during the next several days from the northern Leeward Islands westward across Puerto Rico and Hispaniola to eastern Cuba and the southeastern Bahamas. 10% chance of formation in the next 48 hours and 10% in the next 7 days. So that's what's going on over there. We also have this area of interest that has been tagged in the subtropical Atlantic. Showers and thunderstorms have developed near the center of a storm-force non-tropical low-pressure area located about 550 miles west of the western Azores Islands. However, any additional development into a subtropical or tropical cyclone is expected to be slow to occur as the system moves eastward during the next few days. Additional information on the system can be available in the high seas forecast issued by the NWS. 20% chance of formation in the next 48 hours and in the next 7 days. So that's what we're also paying attention to right here. We're going to go ahead and do satellite imagery in just a little bit, but we're going to start briefly with these 2 areas of interest right here in the subtropical Atlantic and over Puerto Rico, just to kind of briefly go over them. And then the main event is going to be this system over here in the Caribbean Sea. Matter of fact, we could probably just start with the subtropical Atlantic first and then just kind of combine these 2 right there. That's actually what I'm going to go ahead and do. Let's go ahead and move out to the subtropical Atlantic over here. Move it over there. Actually, never mind. We could just use the full Atlantic view for that. In terms of the subtropical development, here's what you have. You have your low pressure system over here off the near the Azores Islands. I say near, it's still hundreds of miles away, but synoptic wise, it's relatively close. But you have that subtropical or tropical low starting to organize and develop right there. We're gonna have to see what happens over the next little while. I want to check the water vapor imagery as well as the wind shear. Water vapor, okay, yeah, there's some dry air going on. right now, but the area around the center is getting mixed out, so we're going to have to pay attention to that. But we'll have to watch that dry air to see how this pans out and see how this evolves over time. But we're going to have to pay very close attention to that, as this does have the potential to impact the Azores Islands. So so if you're tuning in from over there, please keep a very close eye on that. We will keep you updated on that here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But overall, it doesn't look like it's going to be too much of a threat. If it does develop, it'll likely be a subtropical storm, relatively weak subtropical storm. That is around, I'd say, 40, 45, 50 miles per hour at max in terms of the tropical development. Now, as a non-tropical low and a non-tropical boundary, you could see some higher winds with that. But overall, as a tropical system, a solely tropical system, or solely subtropical system, 40, 45, 50, that's what I'm thinking with that. Let's go ahead and zoom into the Western Atlantic as now, so we can go ahead and look at this. We're seeing two areas of interest right here. We're going to start off briefly with this area of interest over here in Puerto Rico right now. This is producing a lot of heavy rainfall through parts of the Dominican Republic, although it has just stayed further just off the coast of that. It's producing the most rainfall, of course, for Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, the Leeward Islands over here, and parts of the Windward Islands as well. And the system is expected to slowly move further and further to the west and start impacting more of the DR, more of Haiti, more of Cuba, and potentially Jamaica as well, as it merges with this area of interest as well, which, by the way, overall, what we're seeing is more that popcorn and convection we were talking about the last couple of days and the last couple of videos we were talking about it. But overall, we're not going to see that much happening, I'd say, tonight, maybe even tomorrow night. I would argue that starting around Saturday is when things really start to ramp up, primarily as you start seeing more organization and development, primarily as you see this tropical area start to merge with this area over here in the Caribbean Sea. If we go ahead and show you water vapor imagery, there is plenty of moist air for the system to really organize and develop at its current place. There is a bit of dry air over Jamaica, Cuba, Haiti, those areas in the Bahamas. That was to be expected with the digging trough that we were showing you in yesterday's video. But in terms of the moisture across where this area of interest is, this is likely going to fill the gap in as this pushes further to the west and merges with the frontal low over here in the Caribbean Sea. That's likely going to close the gap for any dry air getting in there and potentially intruding into this as this approaches the Yucatan Peninsula or Cuba or the Gulf of Mexico, whichever of the three. All not optimal situations, as the models have pretty much did a 180. Before, they were calling for the system to head towards Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Now they're expected to head towards Cuba, the Yucatan Peninsula, and the Gulf of Mexico. So that's what we have going on right now, and that's mainly the satellite analysis we can give you so far, because there's not too much to really go off of because of the popcorn and convection. If we actually had sustained convection and all that stuff, I could analyze it a bit better, but right now there's not going to be much developing in the next couple of days. I'd say starting around Saturday is when you're going to start seeing stuff organizing and developing in the Caribbean Sea, but we'll have to pay attention to this as this system evolves. Let's go ahead and take a look at the conditions for all three of these systems right here. Let's start with the global sea surface temperatures. Yeah, case in point, the system out here in the subtropical Atlantic, it's in 21 degrees Celsius, 22 at most. It's not really going to do that much. That's 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 72 if you're at the 22 degrees Celsius level. That's not susceptible for tropical development. Subtropical development, maybe, but that's not really good for tropical development. It's not nearly warm enough to do that. So I'm not that concerned with this area of interest right there, although a subtropical storm definitely is possible with that. What I am more concerned about is the Caribbean Sea. Let's go ahead and zoom in on this real quickly and give you a general idea of what I am looking at. But here we go. We have 30 plus degrees Celsius waters across much of Puerto Rico, much of the Virgin Islands, much of the Leeward Islands over there for this area of interest. It's mainly going to be the shear that's going to chip the system apart and not allow for the system to develop if it doesn't. If it does, quote unquote, great. We have another named system out there. If it doesn't, then it's going to get merged with this with this area of interest in the Caribbean, which, by the way, is in 29 plus degrees Celsius waters, is expected to move to the northeast first into 30 plus degrees Celsius waters, and then move to the west and remain in these 29 to 30 degrees Celsius waters all the way until it gets to the Gulf of Mexico, where those water temperatures do start to cool off a little bit. But if it does enter the loop current, it's going to be able to sustain itself or even intensify a little bit stronger, as there's still plenty of ocean heat content over there. But it's going to really if it really gets to the point where it heads towards land, then that's when it's going to start weakening. So we're going to have to watch this, pay very close attention to that. Right here. Next thing we're looking at is the climatology in terms of the water temperatures. Let's go ahead and start with the North Atlantic Ocean right here. Okay, that's not giving us a good map. Temperatures are continuing to plummet, at least in terms of the Atlantic by and large. If we show you the main development region, they are starting to fall quite a bit right now, but overall still decent, relatively good for tropical development. Gulf of Mexico, you're seeing those waters plummet. I expect those waters to continue to drop off as we start to see if this is, well, not as we start to see, if the system moves into the Gulf of Mexico, because what hurricanes tend to do, and I've said this like a broken record, is they tend to cool off the water temperatures, especially at the surface, and we could see more of that happening across much of the Gulf of Mexico, especially near the loop current, which would be at least short term would be really bad, because that would mean another potentially powerful hurricane. But in the long term, and in terms of ending this hurricane season, that would be generally good news in the long term in terms of tropical development. It would still be really bad if it hit people and hit areas like Tampa Bay and all those areas. I know Tropicana Field was, their roof, especially their fiberglass roof, was absolutely destroyed by that, which is always sad to see. Because I'm a huge baseball fan. You see me wear my baseball hats, so it's always sad to see. And I hope Tropicana Field gets built back up soon and they can play baseball there for the 2025 season, because I really hope the Rays can do something this year and all that. But that's besides the point. That's what we're looking at for the climatology. Ocean heat content continues to be ocean heat content. Not very surprising here, except there is a few surprising twists that I talked about in yesterday's video. First of all, this system's moving to the northeast at first, and it's going to be entering this massive blob of OHC over here off the coast of Jamaica and off the coast of Haiti. The main question is it going to be too broad to use that to take its advantage? Because I want to make this absolutely clear. This system is expected to be really broad at first. It's not supposed to be this tight storm and it's supposed to develop overnight. It's supposed to be really broad at first and then tighten up as it starts to organize and develop. That process can take several days. And by the time the system moves over to this portion of the Caribbean Sea, it might not be able to do that. So the main question with this is, how quickly is the pressure gradient going to tighten? And how quickly is that pressure gradient force the only force that can affect the winds catch up to that? That's the main question we're looking at right here. Even if it doesn't develop and really ramp up in intensity in this blob of OHC, it has this other blob of OHC pretty much encompassing the entire northwestern Caribbean Sea, and where the highest OHC values are where the system is forecasted to move into. So we could see a scenario where the pressure gradient starts to tighten as it's moving out of this blob of OHC, and then moves near Jamaica, and then moves into the northwestern Caribbean, and that's when we start seeing our potentially big development and potentially big intensification right there. So there are multiple, I would say, scenarios. This is going to be a very fluid situation over the next few days, but I want you to keep in mind that we're looking at all the scenarios to see what's going to happen, and we're going to keep you updated on that. Let's go ahead and show you the wind shear. Wind shear is going to be the main killer for this tropical development wave over here in Puerto Rico. The shear is moving out of the area right now, but at this current time, it's just still over there, and it's still going to be, even after this huge shear blob moves out of the region, you're going to start seeing still about 30 knots of wind shear, which is very much not optimal for tropical development, and that's partly why I think the system's not going to really do that much, other than potentially bring some flooding impacts to Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, especially Haiti. That's my main concern with this potential flooding risk, because their infrastructure is absolute shit. And Yeah, I know that was kind of a joke from last year, but regardless of that, ultimately not fantastic. And more likely than not, this system's going to merge with this Caribbean system over here, and we'll have to pay attention to that. But we are seeing, in terms of that Caribbean system, we're still seeing a lot of wind shear impacting the system, about 30 to 40 knots last I checked. However, keep in mind, there's a ridge that's starting to develop over parts of the United States, and that ridge is going to dig down and potentially have a huge synoptic impact for areas in the Caribbean Sea, as this wind shear is expected to decrease. I want to make it very clear. This wind shear is expected to decrease and do it relatively dramatically. Let's go ahead and pull up the shear forecast and the moisture component real quickly. Let's go ahead and use the European. Courtesy of the European, we'll use we can use the 12Z European since that's now out. Let's go ahead and look at the shear forecast from the European. Shear expected to remain there for the next 30 hours. Then it's expected to start slowly weakening after about 48 hours and moving out of the region. And then you have this system starting to organize and develop over parts of that huge blob of OHC. We'll get to that once we get to the regular computer model analysis of this video. But right now, you see that wind shear decrease, and then and then in the Western Caribbean Sea, there's pretty much no wind shear there. So if this system wants to really take off, it has a lot of opportunities to do it. It has the opportunity of doing it in that blob of OHC off the coast of Jamaica and Haiti, and it has that opportunity in the northwestern Caribbean Sea, as there's not going to be much wind shear stopping this system over there. Let's go ahead and show you the moisture component to all of this. Moisture, okay, this is just the regular model. Moisture component, yes, there is some dry air moving in right now, but this area of interest right here, this is why we're highlighting this over here. That is going to bring in a relatively big moisture infusion for at least the central part of the Caribbean Sea, and as the system starts to organize and develop, it's going to mix out whatever dry air is left, and then it has a relatively moist environment in the eastern Gulf of Mexico over here. There is a bit of a dry slot over here. There's a relatively big increase of dry air over here, but right now we're going to have to pay attention to it, and we're going to have to take this very seriously, as this does pose a potential risk to a lot of people. Let's go ahead now and show you the latest analysis from the ensembles. Here's the GFS ensembles from the 12Z. Once again, a massive shift to the west, as we're seeing right here. We're seeing this this convection starting to organize and develop over here in this part of the Caribbean Sea, and then start to make a massive shift to the west into the northwestern Caribbean Sea, and then into the Gulf of Mexico, where we're seeing a lot of runs as to what may be happening. The majority of the runs want the system to hit Florida, but really, where in Florida is anywhere's guess. Some want it to impact Pensacola. Some want to impact Tampa Bay again, which would be absolutely disastrous, especially as they're still recovering from Hurricane Milton. And some wanted to head towards southwest Florida, and we're going to have to pay attention to that as well. And next, we'll show you the European ensembles, just to kind of give you some context. We'll go ahead and go out to 240 hours out. Once again, we're still seeing that clustered area of that cluster of ensemble runs right there that we're going to have to pay attention to. But by and large, we're starting to see a much better scenario than we were a few days ago. So now let's go ahead and start showing you some model runs. We kind of alluded to this with the European, but the European wants the system to be around tropical storm strength as it heads towards the Yucatan Peninsula and then into the Gulf of Mexico, where it's expected to start slowly weakening and kind of get choked out over in the western Gulf near pretty much off the coast of Texas and Mexico right there. Don't think it's going to push that far to the west, but we'll have to pay attention to that. Here's the GFS run that we have right here. The GFS wants Haiti to get hit by a Category 1 or Category 2 hurricane for some reason, and it's just been relatively wonky, partly due to these huge low pressure areas. What the GFS wants is a Fujiwara effect, where the system that's currently over Puerto Rico goes into the Gulf, and where the system is currently over the Caribbean enters the Atlantic and impacts parts of the East Coast over there. We'll have to pay attention to see how it goes. Canadian run, we'll go ahead and show you that as well. Canadian run has the system organizing and developing, and then moves really much more to the west. Jamaica needs to watch this very closely. We're going to have to pay attention to this, and then we're going to go ahead see a 980 millibar Category 1 hurricane make landfall in the western tip of Cuba, and then enter into the Gulf of Mexico, where a Florida impact is more likely according to the Canadian run. Last run we'll go ahead and show you is the Icon run. Here's the 12Z Icon right here. Has the system really organized and developed, gets down to a 958 millibar system, and then makes landfall in the Yucatan Peninsula, weakens due to land interaction, and that's pretty much the last we'll hear of that for now until the system enters the Gulf of Mexico. But we will keep you updated on this. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Shout out to Daniel as an official sponsor of the Pat's Path Predictor Patreon. If you want to help the channel out, be sure to join the Patreon. It's the first link in the description down below. If you want to come hang out with us at Storms Unite, be sure to join our Discord server. Link to that is right over there. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.